Yes, hello, folks. Welcome to the weekly Manchester United podcast. I'm your host, as always, Phil Brandt, joined with my regular co-host, the excellent James Rhodes. On this Monday morning, of course, the lead up to the Premier League opener, Jamesy, this weekend. United have just played Fiorentina this weekend. First of all, how was your weekend, and what do you think of Fiorentina game?
Yeah, my weekend was pretty good, very nice. It's the last weekend of kind of a summer here, technically. So, kid back to school, life will resume a little bit of normalcy, of course. Then next weekend, Premier League kicks off. So, no, it was a good weekend. Watching my kid continuing his own game after the Fiorentina game, which was nice. It was a good game too. But yeah, the game itself was interesting. I was I'm kind of okay with it still. I thought it was a bit slow. I thought that, the first 10, 15 minutes, the team were pretty poor. After that, I thought they were pretty well in control of the situation
Mm.
as a whole in the game. I thought they did a decent job working through creating chances, putting things together. And it's about what I expect without a striker on the pitch for United, which I still believe very strongly is the most important position in football is to
Mm.
have a really good number nine. Um, so I was happy with it and not disappointed. I think people probably look at it and think we're still a bit slow and threatening, things like that. And I get that aspect, but
Yeah.
I felt pretty good about it in general, given that there was no striker on the pitch.
Look, to be if I was going to be if I was going to be if I was going to be negative, I would say what would concern me in the last two games is it's very similar to what we saw last season. In that United are drawing games they should be winning, and not able to turn domination of possession and other things into your system and turn those into goals. But yes, you're
Yep.
right. The striker situation. The other thing, the alternative to that, of course, is that it's also a positive to find these things out now in pre-season and not find them out against Arsenal or Brentford or Brighton, like we found out before, where it's taken a couple of games into the season to realize we're not up to pace. I would rather have a competitive preseason against very good teams where it tells you exactly where you're at. Because James, the fact that United have been off the pace a bit in some of these games might be part of the reason why they're moving for Balaba with such urgency. Because now they're
Yeah.
able to scale. Okay, you know what? This is how we look against our peers, Everton. Because you could go out against a team, and batter them. Any type of team that you're not going to face
Yep.
in a week in your regular season that are levels below that's an exhibition and give you this sense that you're better than what you are. So the fact that United have had a couple of realism checks against Everton and Fiorentina is a positive in the sense that that is also telling Amorim preseason, this is where you're at. You need this Balaba type player now.
Yeah, it is. And to be fair on this front, I've watched a fair bit of other teams preseasons as well,
Yeah,
and I
me
think
too.
that as United fans, we like, we're very United centric, and so when you see United struggle a little, it's like the end of the world. But when you go watch the other teams play, you go, hang on a second. Arsenal had like one good half this entire preseason. They looked awful. Their fans are like in a panic about how they've been playing over the summer. Liverpool got beat by Crystal Palace in the Community Shield, which is actually not, it's not a friendly. It's kind of in the middle between a preseason and an actual
Yeah,
game.
it
Teams have
definitely.
started to take it more seriously, I think, in recent years.
Well, it's never a trophy you're okay with losing, James.
Right. Yeah.
Everyone goes out
If
to
you win
compete
it,
to win
it's
it.
yeah.
Yeah. I don't care if you don't care about the trophy itself, but you care about winning that game. No one wants to go into a Premier League season having lost the Community Shield. Even if you don't care about the Shield
Yeah.
itself, you care about the game.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And so it's like if you're in it, you want to win it. You know what I mean? And I feel like the teams were trying. Liverpool spent a lot of money, bought 150 million players and all sorts of stuff. They look poor defensively. They look weak. When I look at one thing that's actually stood out to me quite a bit, um, United's goals they're conceding are. Somebody may say this is not a good sign, but it is to me. United's goals they're conceding look like mistakes not like that they're getting outplayed. And there's a difference in those two things, I think. Okay, like like the Everton game. What happened? Ugarte gave away the ball in a terrible position. They concede instantly. Bruno gives the ball away in a terrible position. They concede instantly. Besides that, they didn't concede any chances the entire game, really. Nothing of substance. And you look at the thing against Fiorentina, it was this set piece, huge mistake. Obviously, they left 3 players open at the back post. Like, they didn't get out, they weren't being outplayed. You know what I mean? They were the better team every game,
Yeah.
all preseason. But,
But here's the thing with that, James, because
yeah,
it's just two couple of things. One,
yeah,
you can't blame that on a team of Ruben Amorim. If you're losing games due to individual errors, that's because your players aren't good enough.
right.
Simple as
Yes.
that. Because typically the team that wins between 2 football teams is the one that makes the fewest mistakes.
Correct. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So if you have individual players making repeated individual errors that repeatedly lead to goals that you can't fix in a team play scenario, that's because your players aren't good enough.
Mm-hmm.
That's what inferior players do. That's why they don't play
Yep.
at this level. And so this is just way too prominent. And you can't fix individual errors on a training ground because that's down to an individual. There's no, there's nothing you can do. There's no drills you can do. There's no procedures you can do. There's nothing you can do that they can coach that out of someone's game. So that's something that has to stop. You can't be making, the best teams don't make repeated mistakes in key areas.
Yep.
That's what.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Yeah.
So it's, I'm not expecting United to be perfect. Then, we deal with the other situation of what's up front, right? Benjamin Sesko, as you quite rightly said, James, was going to be unveiled before the game. I was hoping he might actually play, but he was unveiled.
Mm-hmm.
Is a very strong possibility that Rasmus Højlund will not be here by the weekend. And even if he is, James, is he someone you want to start with, considering how overtly United are behaving and wanting to get him out of the football club, which looks to be against his wishes, to be honest? I think he prefer to stay without a guarantee of playing time. But then can you really go into the Arsenal game without Šeško, who hasn't played yet? Are you going to give him his full debut against Arsenal? That's a big, that's a big jump. Or Rasmus Højlund?
Yeah, well, I think it's pretty obvious it's not going to be Højlund, right? I mean, I was surprised at just how. Maybe we shouldn't be surprised. Not that he was mean about it, because Amram's been a little meaner on some topics, but he was pretty direct. 3 strikers played in that game against Fiorentina. Mason Mount, Mbeumo, and Cunha all played as strikers in that game. Rasmus Højlund didn't come off of the bench. Ruben Amorim said in his comments pretty much the first thing after the game that we lacked a reference point up front at striker, but now we have one in Šeško, which is a bit like, it's a pretty strong message between your players, your team selection, and those comments. Well, you're not our striker, Rasmus Højlund. There's been no talk of Joshua Zirkzee leaving. I think he provides obviously something different in the number 9 position than Rasmus Højlund does, and that Benjamin Šeško would as well. I think it is pretty obvious it's not going to be Rasmus at the weekend. They're not going to start the regular season with him after him not playing in the final games of the preseason on purpose.
So
I think Šeško will play. I think he'll play. And the reason I say that is this. Number one, it's a week. He's got a week. 2, he didn't not do preseason with Leipzig. When you look at Bryan Mbeumo, when he went back to Brentford for that few days before the deal was done, he wasn't doing any preseason. He wasn't even running. He was literally took some pictures for their whole thing, and then sitting inside on the bike, like we talked about, doing nothing. So
be desperate to play this game.
Yeah, and he'll be fit. Match fit game. He played 2 45-minute halves in preseason for Leipzig. So he's played some matches. He'll want to play. Ruben will want him to play. He's fit. He's young. He's not an injury-prone player, which is a good thing. 3 years, he's not had a single injury. I think he'll play. It's what we've got to lose in this instance.
I'm surprised United don't organize some type of behind closed doors game on
There's been talk about that. Yeah, maybe they will.
something that's reminiscent of analogous with what he's going to play at the Premier League level. What I'm interested to see is Šeško will want to play this weekend. Let's be honest, right? I mean, I was listening to Laurie Whitwell talk about this on the Fantastic Talk the Devils podcast. Which I highly recommend if you haven't listened to it. And he was talking about the fact that, look, Šeško would have preferred Arsenal. I think, if he had had his way, that whatever happened that didn't work out. I don't think United was a terrible alternative. I just wonder how anxious he is to play against Arsenal, to prove a point, and to prove a point to Arteta, to prove a point to Arsenal, and endear himself to obviously United fans. And look, I remember Anthony's debut against Arsenal. For some reason, I mean, the last time I remember United playing Arsenal the opening day of the season, I think it was 1990 when they beat them 4-0. And I remember this really, really well. It was 1980. It was, yeah. And everything looked to be amazing. We all know how that season ended up. FA Cup winners, but the league was a disaster. I have a feeling that United will start well against Arsenal. And I feel it'll be a different omen than what we saw in 1980 when they beat Arsenal 4-0. I think that if they beat Arsenal, what we said on Thursday, the momentum they'll get from that, it seems a bit over dramatic, but that this game at the weekend has season-changing ramifications for me.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm sure Ten Hag believes if that offside hadn't happened against Arsenal all that time ago that he referenced for a good 18 months, that the momentum would have been No, I'm not. I might have been. It is funny because I actually thought that was a really good game from United, one of their best performances in a long time away at Arsenal, and they were so close to getting the win there. But no, look, I actually quite agree with you. It's a big test. It's a big test. It's a big game. If you and the thing is where it's important here is if you lose or you don't or you draw but it's tight, it's not going to change too many people's feelings about the season because we kind of know where we're at. If it's tight, if it's close, if you're competitive,
yeah,
and
sure,
necessarily
yeah,
win,
yes.
most of us are going to be like, yeah, that's what we expected. You'll get people. They're always going to be outliers. People lose their shit over it and things like that. But if you win, it will create a sense of momentum, belief, that obviously we can compete, because you have to look at Arsenal and say, in some respects, they might be the preseason favorites at the moment. They've got a strong team that's gotten second multiple times now. They've added well. City were bad last season.
Liverpool, man, seriously?
Well, Liverpool, Liverpool have spent a lot of money, to be fair, yes, but they've lost Trent, which I think has been an important part of their team for quite a long time. They've had other losses as well, unfortunately, different to that. And they have a lot of new players coming in to kind of sometimes the continuity is not as much there this season with Liverpool as it was before, because they've made a lot of changes in the market, and it's like boom or bust. They've spent a lot of money on some big players. So I think it's a little debatable,
Well, I think in honest Plat's defense, if you look at Guardiola, one of the challenges he's had, even with unlimited resources, has been rebuilding City to a level they were at.
Yes.
So trying to rebuild with players that are totally different now, that is it's not a guarantee. That transition is really difficult. I was going to ask you, if United, don't get off to a great start on Saturday. Let's say they fall behind, or Sunday they fall behind. What's the sweep on how long it'll take before Cunha and Buemo and Sesko are being called shit, overrated, and frauds? I'm going to say, will we get 5 minutes? Kick off? Someone kick off, someone knock a low ball, kick off, and shit, overrated, fraud.
I think the other side of that is that is obviously, you're talking about Šeško and his side against Arsenal, but of course you also have Gyökeres on the other side of this, which I think is an extra motivation for Ruben and everybody, because he also chose Arsenal over United, over his former manager, and where he did his best work at under Sporting. And so you'll get a lot of comparisons, like how does Gyökeres do versus how do our forwards do? they've signed as well. What Madueke, maybe he'll start. So I think, yeah, it'll be really quick. You're going to get big sweeping decisions over who had the best signings and which players did they sign are crap and things like that within that first game. If they score some goals and their forwards are producing and ours aren't, it'll start right away, instantly. No doubt about
Oh,
that.
James, at 100% start right away. And then there'll be people who'll spend the rest of their lives following these players and hating them and hope that they fail everything that they do going forward the rest of their life, which is just an utterly bizarre modern phenomenon.
Yeah.
But Solskjaer was arguably going to get sacked by Besiktas. I see all these people online that are laughing, that are encouraged by this. And I'm like, I don't understand that. Like, you're a Manchester United fan. This guy's a Manchester United legend. Liverpool fans don't do this with Dalglish. Who feel as a they're not. It's like, this is the club legend. Why do you invest so much time and energy into hating players or people? Like, I that's just a weird modern phenomenon. But
Yeah.
hopefully, this is something that Mbumo, Cunha, and Šeško don't experience. One of the things about Šeško, James, that's been talked about is the similarities between him and Rasmus Højlund. When Højlund signed, I felt the same way that I feel about Šeško. I was very encouraged, excellent young striker, and we all know how it turned out. I think one thing that's very, very different for Šeško is he's got two players in behind him in Cunha and Mbumo, where the goals are going to be, there's an expectation they're going to be spread out. It's not going to be put on just one player's shoulders to lead the line and hit big numbers. We're going to have a variety of goals in this team.
Yeah, I think so. I think that helps us as well, certainly. Another difference, and I know it can seem like not a difference, and I'm not been huge on the idea of a young striker this summer all along, so it's not personal on that respect. I was hoped they would get someone more proven because of the pressures that get loaded on and what happens with Højlund and all of that. But to be fair as well to Benjamin Šeško, even though he's still quite young, he's had 2 full seasons in the Bundesliga at this point, at top flight football. He's had, and then he had 2 seasons at Salzburg as well. So he's had 4 seasons nearly in that Red Bull system.
His international record's quite good too, James, for Slovenia.
Right. And so you look at that and you say, yeah, so he's been playing at the, exactly. He's been playing at the international level for a bit. He's definitely a lot more experienced than Rasmus. Like, let's be clear on that as well. He's been in the first team for a serious team for quite a while now. 3 years, you would say he's had his actual experience. I mean, Salzburg is, but they're in the Champions League, I believe, right? Isn't the
Let me ask you this: if Højlund does go, we'll get to this in a second, but we'll talk about the revolving credit. Actually, let's just move on to that. The revolving credit facility, James, gives United quite a lot of room to do stuff, right? If Rasmus Højlund leaves, does that leave United in a position to maybe need someone like an Ollie Watkins? Because now you're getting quite thin on the ground up front, right? So, you still have Xerxes to come back, but Ruben Amorim is on record saying Xerxes is not a striker, right? I mean, he said this himself.
Yeah.
So he's not going to be competing for the number 9. I don't think United need to be concerned about the load management with the number of games. I think 22-year-old striker stays fit, should be able to play most of these games. But players get injured, things happen. Obviously you've Cheeto, to think about. But does that put United in a position to maybe need another striker with the revolving credit facility? Obviously, we'll talk about Donnarumma and Balaba in a second, but there's room there to do something if they wanted.
Yeah, I think not necessarily, because if we had Europe, like you said with the load management, if we had Europe, you'd be if it was like a year later, like if we take this team today and go 1 year forward and we're back in Europe and we're a year deep further in on this project, on this build, on these players, then you're going to have 2 good strikers, because you're starting to compete. You can't lose out on any games. You can't lose out on any cups. You're trying to compete on multiple fronts. For this summer, I would say if you bring Carlos Baliba in, for example, it gives you another option and flexibility because you have so many 10s. You could play Baliba with Ugarte, you could play Baliba with Kobe Mainu, which means you could move Bruno up to the 9, which means you could move Cunha or up to the 10, excuse me. You could move Cunha to the 9 and Mbumo to the other side, and you still have a strong front 3. Now, he trialed a little bit, obviously, both Mbumo and Cunha at striker during preseason. So I think part of the line of thinking on this is that adding to the midfield gives us as well potential more options up front. And for this season, it's probably enough. It's probably enough, but it's also a matter of like, what are you aiming for this season? You know what I mean? Like, are you willing? How much do you want to spend? In the pursuit of what might be your aims for Europa. How much do you need in order to do that? And I feel as though if they get a midfielder in, their thinking is we've got enough to be back in Europe even without that extra person in there. So let's wait till next year, make sure we get the right thing in place there as well. So I feel like I've thought about that too, but I think that their feeling is they have enough in terms of options that can play in these positions, especially again, given they've done their homework on Sheshko, like you say, 22 years old, he should be fit enough. And again, his injury record is near impeccable, which does matter. I think they feel better about injuries in general, by the way. Mason Mount has performed more games in a row than we've seen. Same goes for Luke Shaw than we've seen in 2 years. So they're feeling better about these guys who've been injured when they come back, that they're going to
Yeah.
stay healthy and keep going,
Yeah. Never underestimate, James, the influence of morale on injury,
Mhm.
right? Because it's true
Mental,
no matter what you do in life. If you're in a happy place, your pain tolerance goes through the roof. You don't notice things in the same way. Your adrenaline is making you do things. You're going to want to play. You're going to want to do things, and you're going to want to play through the pain barrier. But once you start getting into a depressive state, then all of a sudden your pain tolerance changes, and it does
Yeah.
affect. Obviously, only an idiot would argue otherwise. Obviously, the state of the mind affects the state of the body. And
Clearly does. Yeah.
I mean, you go back and listen to interviews with Rooney and everything. How many of those players would play through the pain barrier, do anything to play? And then, if you remember, he said a while ago, last season, some of those players can play, right? When he was talking
Yeah.
about injuries, and then all of a sudden, we'll start to clear up around a cup final and stuff, right? And so, there's definitely something to that. The Carrington upgrade will add an awful lot. We saw it opening on Friday, which looked amazing. That's going to help an awful lot with morale
Yeah.
and provide facilities that do make a difference on the pitch, which seem marginal to us, but they actually the aggregate over the course of the season are tremendously significant. Before we get to that Carrington thing, let's continue to talk about that revolving credit facility, because that gives United enormous financial freedom in the market, on top of which Alejandro Garnacho's story is gathering pace. And every time I look at this kid, James, I shake my head and go, this kid badly needs, one, people around him that care about him, and two, that have a brain. Because he's uploaded a picture. I don't know how recent it is. It's on the internet with the vape. Look, players have smoked from the dawn of time. But this is just something he doesn't need right now. And this
Yeah.
is something that's so easily avoidable that anyone with just any, commitment to this guy's well-being, even as a courtesy, would look at son, don't make sure it doesn't get uploaded. Take that vape out. That's stupid.
Yeah.
Right? It's not a hanging offense, but it's not what you need right now. And I don't know, this kid 2 years from now, James, we could be talking about Garnacho in the same breath as Jadon Sancho. Or he could be a world-class football player, but he's going to decide that. Looks like he will go to Chelsea, but what was your take on this vaping thing?
It's like you say, it's like players and people do things like this a lot, but it's like there's too many questions on character on these issues already. It's August 11th. You're not playing for any club right now. If you don't get this move, you're probably sitting out until January. The worst thing you can do is present any kind of anything that makes someone just go, and add that extra thought into your character.
Yeah.
It's the worst thing you can do. You need to look like the consummate professional who is working hard and doing nothing else and completely focused. That's how it needs to appear to anybody,
But
because
clubs
you
are
don't
also
need
paying
to.
with their sponsors, James. You know, like I don't. Do I want
Yeah.
this guy? Sorry, man. Go ahead. Yes, you're right.
Yeah, no, it's like you don't need to give anybody else more reasons to worry about you, more reasons to second guess, more reason to have concern over your how are you doing, because it's like, sure, it could be like, oh, it's just a casual thing, or someone could assume from the picture that he's been spending all summer heavy on the vapes and his lungs are in shit shape. Like, people can assume a lot
Of
when you open
course.
the doors to assumption, and it's like you don't need to add those kinds of questions to yourself when you're already not successful, not doing, not in this current state of top end everything. I mean, it's just kind of hard to describe. It's like, it's when you're doing really well, you can get away with more than when you're not. And that's always been the case. And it's just silly. It's so many things, and the problem is that we've seen a lot of this. The social media activity and thing has been a big part of what has led to this situation. And it shows, I think, the biggest concern is that nothing's changed in that respect. That would
Yeah.
be the biggest concern.
Excuse me. I think what I could be completely wrong about all this, James. Right? So maybe I'm 99% chance that I am. When you're a kid, you rebel against
Mhm.
authority, right? I did it. Most of us did it,
Oh, yeah,
and then you double
of course.
down.
Yeah.
And these are the types of things you see when you're doubling down and you think you're 100% correct. You start to taunt a little bit. The vape, I don't believe that was an accident, by the way. I believe that was deliberate in terms of it being
Mhm.
left in there as if but the problem is your reputation and but your reputational equity that has so much that is so determinant in who moves for you, because clubs are looking at that going, I don't need something that I'm going to have to apologize for 6 months from now. We've got big brands. You want to go to a top club, you have to behave a certain way because the sensitivities around these sponsors that are paying exorbitant amounts of money to be partnered with you, they don't want to see that.
Yeah.
And they don't want to. So you're looking at that and going, son, everyone lies on their resume on LinkedIn. He's doing a LinkedIn resume right now and it's putting vaping on it when you're a professional footballer is just
Yeah.
not it's going to cost you,
Yeah.
and it's so easily avoidable. But on the bigger picture, you need to get 50 million thereabouts for him. Has the fact that United, this revolving credit facility, been made public, and the fact that it's now made people aware that United don't have to sell to buy, has this affected the price of the players? The fact that Ruben Amorim has already said in the last week they'll be reintegrated if they aren't sold. So are we looking at United wrestling back some initiative on these transfer dealings and saying, look, we don't need to sell them to move. We will reintegrate them, and you need to pay their market rate.
Well, what I kind of like about it is that I'm confused, and I think that that's a good thing, because, like, if it's funny because I was listening to Andy Mitten on the Talk of the Devils thing as well, and he was like, "Yeah, I said this too some weeks ago," which I've heard and said. When we finished in Bumo, everybody who speaks to the club or sources on that side was told, "We got to sell to buy." And then United went out and spent a bunch of money on Benjamin Shea, 85 million euros, not an insignificant amount of money. And they
Mm-hmm.
said, well, yeah, it's Salons and, Rashford wages, and we got some more money. And actually, we had more cash lined up because we were going to pay 30 million up front for Liam Delap. We got good payment terms on these deals, yada, yada, et cetera. Right. But then you look at the situation now, and what are you still told when you ask about it? We need to sell some players in order to buy Baleba. We're very interested. We want to get that deal done. We know it's going to cost a hell of a lot of money, and it will. This is a 100 million player. When you look at Brighton and their selling and their costs, and the kind of the market rate for these top midfielders, Caicedo went for 115, Enzo Fernandez went for 100. These these players are going for those types of prices, and so when you ask, you get, you know, we got to raise some money, we got to sell, we got to do all that, but at the same time, you're going, But you do have this credit facility. You do have the ability to draw down on cash if need be. You do have the ability to buy now and sell later because
Mm.
apparently the PSR position is very good. You do have the ability as well to look at the PSR perspective from a yearly situation here. You don't have to sell tomorrow to balance PSR. You could sell in January. You can hold out on Garnacho and say, well, if you're not going to pay us what we want, he'll just be in the reserves, and then we'll sell him in January, and we'll still be able to buy our player. So it's a mixture here, I think, of that, and I think it's an interesting thing to look at the perspective of the sales and say we're going to get the prices we want for these players because we don't have to sell them to pay for what we're going to get. And I think from the perspective of buying, now that you're at this stage in the window, Brighton aren't giving you a discount no matter what you do. You're just going to, if you want to buy a player from Brighton, you pay whatever the asking price is from Brighton. They don't really do, they
Oh,
sell so well, they just sell players for whatever price they want to sell them for, you know? I mean, they sold João Pedro for 55. They've sold, Caicedo in the past for these huge sums. Like, you're just going to pay. And so I feel as though, it's a little confusing as to whether United can make moves or not. But I think like you said, it might be wrestling a bit of control back. Like we're not going to accept cut rate
well,
prices for these players here.
which they shouldn't. And
Yeah.
that's the thing. I mean, they have to hold firm to me on the Garnacho price, James, because I think that first of all, to me, he's a £50 million footballer. Easily, Chelsea would be paying that no problems. And you know, you're looking at this young man, and you're saying to yourself, he has to also calculate the cost to him. I mean, that picture wasn't just a message to United; it was a message to Argentina. What is he going to do?
Yeah.
For the next 6 months, if he wants to go to a World Cup, then he's going to have to make sure that he finds his way into that Argentina squad and get back into United squad. With regards to Baliba, if you're going to move for him, James, you've got two questions. One, but is the price we're being quoted at right now going to come down? If it comes down, it's because this player has declined, in which case we don't want them.
Yeah.
Okay. If he continues to perform at the levels that we think he's at right now, that price isn't coming down.
Yeah.
So in 12 months, that price will probably go up.
World Cup,
So yeah,
AFCON, got lots of things that can increase the price on this. Yeah.
and United won't have approached Brighton expecting a £30 million price. So if you want someone like Balaba, whatever, I want to pronounce the kid's name right, then you go in with an expectation that this is what you're going to end up paying is around this price. It's not going to get lower.
Yep.
So if so putting it off the next season or January to me isn't going to help. This is probably the best price, assuming he fulfills his potential. This will be the best price you'll ever get him at.
Yeah, and part of the big feeling on it when I first heard about it and was trying to figure out whether they'd actually do a move for him, one of the big concerns that was mentioned to me is that there'd be a lot of competition for him. Next summer, there's a feeling that Liverpool are going to be in for him. City, you can kind of see their squad moving in a
Rodri being out.
direction where they're probably going to need to buy a midfielder.
Rodri,
Now
yeah.
those clubs they've spent a lot of money this summer so far, so they've kind of focused on other positions at the moment, and so the feeling was kind of like, well, we'd rather spend the money next summer. It's harder to get this deal done now from our financial perspective. It puts more pressure on our finances. If you do it and you spend this, I think United have to get into Europe or they're going to be in big trouble financially. I say
Mm,
big trouble, meaning you're probably going to be really limited in the market if you can't get back into Europe after spending more money like this, from a PSR perspective. But alternatively, it's probably the best time to do it is now. Like you said, one,
mm,
he probably, unless you think he's going to have, like you said, unless you think he's going to have a bad season, which you're not thinking, that's why you'd want to buy him. That's why you rate him so highly. He will get more expensive next summer. There will be 2, 3, 4 big clubs in for him next summer. I mean, you could even see a world where Arsenal and Tottenham come in
mhm,
for a midfielder next summer as well. And he is the best midfielder in the league outside of the big four, the big clubs at the moment who are already at that level. That is the view on him, and that is, I think, almost everybody would agree with that. You have him and Adam Wharton as like these two midfielders that young midfielders that everybody thinks are like the next top midfielder, and they're already performing in the Premier League at a high level. You're not going to get them cheaper later on. This is it. So now or never. And I think the fact that they made a move and have started it does imply that they probably intend to see it through. And
Yeah.
I can't think that they would have gone in without knowing, like you say, like they would have known a range of what the price would be. That doesn't mean it's a done deal. It doesn't mean it's easy to do. I think it's a situation with Brighton where they're not going to sit there and just happily like tell you a price and enter negotiations because it's August 11th. You're going to have to make them a really big offer that you think is about what they're going to want to get the door open. And then once the talks start, I think you can follow through on that. I think the only way they can really mess this up is if they completely misjudge that and put in some offer that's like derisory, and then Brighton are just like, nah, we're not going to sell this summer then.
I mean, to be fair, any of us haven't been doing that.
No.
You know, when they've zeroed in on a player, they've been serious. Like, I can't think of many players they focused on that they haven't got.
In aside from players that have turned them down, like Delap, who chose a different one, things like that, they've actually, I believe, signed every player they wanted and really went for, besides Gerard Braithwaite, which was the first one and was actually before Omar Barada had even started on the job.
Mm.
So they've been pretty good about it. When they really go for the player, they pretty much end up
Well,
getting them at the end.
let me ask you about another one because right before we came on this podcast, I retweeted Fabrizio Romano saying that Donnarumma will be leaving PSG, and Premier League being the most likely destination. Premier League, who outside of Manchester United could you see Donnarumma going to?
Chelsea. Chelsea's the only one I would say, because
But didn't Maresca
they
say
keep
was
doing
second
this.
was Raya Sanchez?
Sanchez, yeah, but it's Chelsea. Like it's hard to explain them, but they just keep doing this. Like, they have this amazing churn, and I think that part of their thing is they've won the Club World Cup. They're looking at this and that, and now they're looking at, here's a keeper who's won the Euros. Here's a keeper who won the Champions League last season. Why not? Apparently, they're one of the clubs that have inquired on him, and based on some of the other solid reports here, um, it just I think
Do you see
Chelsea
it?
have an interest.
Do you see United being serious about going in for him?
It's complicated. I know for sure United have made contact with his people. I know for sure United have been kept up in the loop on his situation. At the same time, anybody that I ask pretty much says very bluntly, we're going to have to move a keeper out to get a keeper in. And they've been saying that for weeks. And that Onana is staying. Now, they made a loan offer for Emi Martinez. And I think kind of the idea here was, we don't want to buy another keeper who's on big wages and all that while Onana's still at the club, and end up having so much. You can end up with 500,000 a week going to keepers. That's way too much money going to keepers on your wage bill. Um, and there's no like word of Onana leaving. That being said, what I have wondered and continue to wonder on this, if there's no direct route for Donnarumma to leave, I look at the situation we have with Jadon Sancho and what's the likely outcome. If there's nobody who's going to buy him, and the wages are a limiting factor, and he's got 1 year left on his contract, what are we going to end up doing with Sancho? Very likely we're going to loan, get a little bit of a fee, get some wages covered, and then his contract will expire next year. Or he stays and he's not in the team and all of that. Well, PSG have kind of made it clear that Donnarumma is not going to be in the team, kind of same as we have. Um, if nobody's willing to pay 25 million and agree a new contract with him with very significant wages for 5 years, and you get towards the end of this window, there's probably a world where they'll say, yeah, we'll take a loan fee and some wage coverage, and then just recoup a little bit of money because we don't want him in the squad. He's not going to be a part of the team next season. So I kind of think maybe that's the strategy from United on this. If they are going to make a move, is do a loan. That way you don't commit to 5 years of Donnarumma.
Look, if you ask me for the preferred outcome in all of this, for me, it would be Onana just finds his form and is an exceptional goalkeeper.
Yeah,
Fitted, and we never
sure.
talk about this
That's the
ever
easiest.
again, but I don't think that's going to happen. But that would be my preferred outcome in all of this.
Yeah.
I just dread a situation where Amorim's got the outfield 10 playing really well and Onana's dropping balls in the net that, you're dominating the game, you're doing exceptionally well, you're 1-0 up, you're about to get the second, and then Onana drops something in the net and you end up losing 3-1. Like that, I can't take it anymore. I mean, there's been so many games where United have been playing well, and then he drops a clamp, and you're like, Jesus Christ, how many times are we going to watch it with this guy every single fucking week?
Right.
There has to be a cutoff point that says, buddy, you cannot be a goalkeeper in the Premier League because this should happen once or twice in your career, not once or twice a week.
Yeah.
Like there has to be. I mean, I don't know. Maybe I go about top on them sometimes. It's just frustrating because I would feel the same about any goalkeeper in that position. It's one of the most frustrating things about watching United is, you're doing well and then something like that happens. And, I'm still traumatized over the Champions League because I still think that he was the single biggest factor in United going out of that Champions League group.
For sure.
I think in many ways, James, that was the one signing that's really more than Anthony sealed Ten Hag's fate.
Yeah, because it cost you a lot of big games and a lot of
Big game.
single-handedly cost you a lot of big games and big competitions and big cups.
And it was his keeper. But okay, moving on, we have quickly take a look ahead to Arsenal this weekend.
Yes.
The league starts. So the starting 11 against Fiorentina, with the exception of a striker, Šeško, do you feel that we're looking at what we'll see against Arsenal or what?
Probably. Apparently, if they get that.
Obviously, if Onana, that we'll see. But
yeah, Onana and Šeško, I think, would be the only two questions in there. I feel otherwise that's probably the starting lineup. You could make an argument. I think the other position to make an argument for is Shaw or Heaven on that left-sided thing. With the experience that Shaw has, he's usually picked him in the more meaningful games when he's been fit as that left-sided center back. But it's probably close to that. I mean, it's hard to say because he could go matchup dependent. Does he go more defensive at wing back and stick Dallo in there instead of Ahmad on that wing back position? I don't know. But you could think that's pretty dang close to his preferred 11. There's a few positions you could change out there, but otherwise it's quite close, I would assume. Yeah.
Arsenal just won their last preseason game, didn't they? And Jacare scored, if I remember
Yes.
correctly.
Correct.
They lost to Villarreal, didn't
Yeah.
they? And then they beat Bilbao here, so they lost 3-2. Beat Athletic Club 3-0. We already did that last season. No problem. But I have a feeling that United will win this game. The weekend, I think they'll come out, they'll play high intensity. We're going to see players. Arsenal haven't faced the United team with that type of bite and intensity in a long time. Worst time for them to play United's first game of the season with the likes of Cunha in that team and Bruno in that team, desperate to face an intensity from United they haven't faced in a long time. Maybe the closest thing they would have had to it was the Anthony debut. But I think that they're going to face a different football team, and I think United will win this game. I hope I'm not being overly optimistic, but we
were okay, in big games even last year. Like it wasn't so much the big games that were so bad. I mean, they beat Arsenal away in the cup at the away, on penalties, but they even would have probably beat them in regular time. They were pretty good against them at home at Old Trafford, even. So I'm kind of with you. I feel like you add the extra attack to that, like you say, the Cunha and Mbeumo ready to go. They're going to be hungry to score.
I'm tired of shit starts to seasons, even the good starts. The Fulham 1-0 one, the Wolves 1-0 one. Both of them almost felt like a defeat, right? But Xerxes scored against Fulham, and it was like, it wasn't great. The Wolves one we heard about for the next 2 years. I want to see United go out start of a season and give me optimism, play well on the front foot, do things that we haven't seen before in this team, score goals, not just one. Don't make some Thomas error to let Arsenal back. Make them be brilliant to beat you. Make sure we're ready for them on set pieces, right? Make sure that you're not being beaten by a fucking corner. Make them beat you, not by an in swinger on top of your keeper. Because you see, if I see, buying deer and nets at the weekend or Onana and corners being swung in at the back post and they're flying over their head in their net, my optimism will explode in about 5 seconds.
Yeah.
right? Like I am haunted by the thought. You're talking about a goalkeeper, James. No disrespect here, but Pilson targeted him,
Yeah.
right? Cunha comes to the football club and admits they targeted him on corners, right? This is a guy that his weaknesses are being targeted, and they're not worrying about his strengths.
Yep.
And Bandier is as bad, if not worse. I am
Yeah.
haunted by the thought of Arsenal just needing to swing a couple of in swingers on top of the keeper and them flying in the net, and then Onana Bandier doing an interview after the game saying, I know we need to be better. Like, man, I can't. My Groundhog Day brain can't take any more of that.
Yeah, I'm with you, of course. I completely agree. It would be nice to see us do something the other way as well, which is why I'd like to see Benjamin Šeško in there. One of the things that I just want to mention there that I think United can do this season that we didn't as much in seasons last is score goals off of set pieces. It's been Brian Mbumo has taken Bruno off of set pieces for the first time in 5 years of a player actually taking Bruno off set pieces regularly. And in that Fiorentina game, he put 4 good balls in a box on those in-swinging crosses. You throw a 6'5" guy in there to help get on the end of those, who's great in the air. I think United can turn the tables a little bit on what we've seen against Arsenal, where they've bullied us on these set pieces and crosses ourselves against our keepers, and maybe do some of that in reverse to them and have the ability to do that as well. But yeah, I agree. I feel like you say there, as long as United don't get calamitous errors out of the back, that they will win this game against Arsenal at the start. I think they will.
James, the last couple of games they've lost against Arsenal are set pieces.
Yeah, that's it.
Like, make them beat you.
Yeah, I know.
Declan Rice, wonder goal, or the 2-1 where Garnacho, which I think was pivotal for Ten Hag, 2 94th and 96th minute set pieces, and at least one of them was a foul in my opinion, but we will see what happens, mate. Score
Yep.
prediction for this weekend.
I'll get 2-1.
2-1. I think I was thinking United win this 2-0. But I could see him conceding the goal. But I still think United will win this game. I don't know if Thursday I'm flying to Hawaii, so we will not be able to do this podcast on
Okay.
Thursday. So maybe Wednesday. I don't know. We'll see. Or else we'll just leave it to Monday. We'll see what happens. If something happens in between, then
Major, we'll talk about it.
we'll contact me out there with my Hawaiian shirt, my ukulele, and my
Yeah. We'll get you ready from the
pina
beach.
coladas.
Yeah.
It's phantom limb syndrome. I'll be grabbing one with my phantom arm, everything, turn the neck.
Yep.
What about that there? So I will just be ripe for commentary next week, whenever this later on this week. So we'll see if we can bring a show before, but if not, definitely be back on Monday. But let's hope you need to get a win this weekend if we don't talk GMZ. If United lose the game with Onana Bandier conceding corners, can you find 6 friends to carry my coffin?
Yeah, we'll see.
Got my kids alone. All right, matey. I'll see you later. Cheers, TMZ.
See you later.
See you, folks. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.